Grandpa, help me. Someone, please help us. Please, save my brother and me. I called my grandpa in desperation. They don't want me or my brother with developmental disorder. Compared to our genius brother, my brother and I were always neglected by our parents. Our parents abandoned us, and I was heartbroken. Grandpa hugged us gently. You've done well. It's okay now. Grandpa's warmth and Tom's smile. In that moment, my tears burst forth. My name is Grace. I'm 22 and working in an office. I have parents, an older brother, and a younger brother, and each of them is unique. If their uniqueness had taken a positive direction, it would have been great, but unfortunately, in our case, it took a negative turn. This is a story about what happened to our family. When we were young, the three of us siblings got along very well. My brother, Mike, who is 2 years older, my younger brother, Tom, who is 2 years younger, and me. I remember us always playing together without much fighting. Mike was hailed as a genius in elementary school. Our parents, sensing that he was somehow different from other kids, had him take an IQ test, and he scored an impressive 150. From that day on, our family, or rather our parents, changed. Mike is amazing. He'll definitely become a politician or the CEO of a big company, my mother would say with a grin. Then my father would chime in, yeah, at the very least, he's bound to be a millionaire, with a smug laugh. Up until then, our parents were like any other parents, showering us 3 kids with equal love. But once they started calling my brother a genius, they changed. They favored him excessively. All meals were Mike's favorites, and they took him out to eat while leaving us behind. They bought him everything and ensured he lived a life of luxury. In contrast, Tom and I were always neglected. Even for vacations, Tom and I had to stay home. Can you believe that? At that time, Tom and I were in 2nd grade and 4th grade. Leaving us behind, our parents would take Mike, who was in 6th grade, on trips. The older brother will take care of us in the future, so of course, it's only natural. Taking you 2 would just be a waste of money, was our parents' reasoning. But leaving 2 kids at home while they went on vacation naturally caused problems. They left money, so we managed by buying food from supermarkets, but young elementary school kids going out at night to buy dinner from supermarkets naturally raised suspicion. Sure enough, someone reported it, and our parents received a stern warning. I wondered why we weren't taken into protective custody, but it was probably because Tom and I weren't especially thin, locked up, or physically abused. I guess it was just a matter of ongoing observation. But please try to understand. Even if it's not visible, kids can still suffer terribly at the hands of their parents. Emotional wounds can't be seen by anyone. But my brother and I were just kids, and there was no way we could express this. Even though our parents favored my brother, they didn't completely ignore us. Any child naturally wants to be with their parents, no matter what. I was relatively lucky. Sure, I had to wear Mike's hand-me-downs, but I was still okay. I was more or less just neglected. And that was considered the better situation. Tom's situation was much worse. As a child, he would suddenly start screaming and running around, and he was quite restless. But I thought boys my age were like that too. However, Tom was a bit different. My brother's language development was slow, and it was often frustrating because we couldn't communicate well. He was very picky about food and would throw meals on the floor if they were his brother's favorites. After starting elementary school, he would sometimes wander around during class or refuse to eat lunch. He occasionally had trouble with friends. Yes, my brother has a developmental disorder. But even though his growth was slow, it didn't mean he wasn't growing. He was growing slowly but surely, and with the help of his teachers, his behavior at school improved. Although his speech was still halting, he could communicate much better. As a 4th grader, I felt relieved by his progress, and we managed to get through the times we were left alone together. But our parents were different. They would compare him to our genius brother and belittle him. I even heard them say, "We wish you had never been born." As an adult now, I understand that parents should never say such things. Now I can argue back. But back then, all I could feel was sadness and frustration, unable to say anything to them. To a child in elementary school, parents are absolute. I think my brother also knew he was being treated differently from our older brother. But maybe because of his developmental disorder and young age, he would forget the harsh words our parents said to him the next day and smile and talk to them as if nothing had happened. I found my little brother incredibly cute and lovable. But our parents looked at him with disdain. They squinted their eyes in disgust and treated him harshly. No matter how much Tom tried to talk to them, they ignored him. And so, the days of our brother being favored continued. For birthdays, our parents would take Mike out to eat. Tom and I would stay home as usual. And for our birthdays, nothing happened. I can't even remember the last time I got a gift. Of course, at Christmas, only Mike got gifts. There was only a study desk for him, and Tom and I had to study using cardboard boxes. I can't count how many times those boxes collapsed. Still, we managed to get meals, and we had a roof over our heads, so we survived. I would hug Tom, who didn't understand anything, and keep saying, "It's okay, Tom, I love you so much. We'll always be together." I don't know why I did that. Maybe it was because both Tom and I were neglected by our parents and craved someone to love. Perhaps I realized, somewhere deep down, that Tom's presence was protecting my fragile mind. When we were young, Mike and I used to talk a lot, but that eventually stopped. Mike had his own room, but Tom and I shared a small one. We were eventually made to eat in our room because our parents thought we bothered Mike. Even when we occasionally saw each other, we felt awkward and couldn't talk. This became more pronounced as we hit adolescence. When I was 12, Tom was 10, and Mike was 14, one spring day. It was a chilly March day. Suddenly, my parents announced, "We're moving to New York soon." Thinking it was another of their usual trips, I was confused when they said, "Just so you know, we're not coming back. We've sold this house. With that money, we've found a place in New York. So we're moving?" I was shocked by the sudden news. Mike has caught the eye of a university professor. He said Mike is a genius. So he's transferring to the university's affiliated school. "Oh, I see. So we're transferring schools too," I said. At 12, I had just graduated from elementary school. Moving right then might have been convenient, but many of my friends were going to the public junior high I was supposed to attend. I felt sad thinking about leaving my friends behind. But then my mother said, as if it were obvious, "What are you talking about? You two are not coming." "What? But we're moving, right? This house will be gone," I replied, confused. "Yes, but you and Tom are not coming with us." I couldn't understand what my mother was saying, and my mind was in turmoil. "So what are we supposed to do?" I asked. My mother just shrugged. "I don't know. You're old enough to figure it out yourselves." "What? Dad, what does this mean?" I turned to my father, panicking. Panicked, I looked at my father, but he didn't take his eyes off the TV and said, "It's simple. We don't need Haruka, who can't study, or Tom, who has a developmental disorder. Don't you understand yet that you two are a burden to us?" "But you can't just," I began to protest. Suddenly, my mother slammed her hand on the table. "Enough. We've supported you enough. What more do you want from us? You and Tom are hopeless. There's no point in raising such kids. You should be grateful we've taken care of you this long." Taken care of? Sure, we had food, clothing, and shelter. But that was it. Did our parents ever come to a school event? Sports day? They never even came to parent-teacher conferences, always saying they were too busy. They kept us alive but completely neglected us. Their selfishness made my vision go black. "Grace, can you give me this?" At that moment, Tom, who didn't understand the situation, handed me a book. Noticing the twisted looks on my parents' faces from the corner of my eye, I gently corrected Tom. "Tom, it's not 'can you give me this?' It's 'can I have this?' Okay?" Then Tom smiled and repeated, "Can I have this?" My innocent little brother, unaware of everything. My emotional anchor. Unknowingly, tears began to fall. "Honestly, you kids are such a curse," my mother snapped. Seeing my father's indifferent face, I made up my mind. I was still a kid, but I was about to enter junior high. I wasn't as helpless as I was when I was younger. Overcome with more anger than sadness, I picked up the phone. I called late at night when my parents were asleep. I thought I might get scolded for calling so late, but as soon as I heard the voice on the other end after a few rings, "Hello," I burst into tears and shouted, "Grandpa, please help us." A few days later, Tom and I were at our grandparents' house. Our maternal grandparents had passed away, and our paternal grandparents lived far away, so we rarely saw them. I was nervous, but after crying and explaining the situation over the phone, Grandpa came to pick us up immediately. By the time he arrived, the house was empty. Our parents had moved out quickly, taking Mike with them. It was truly unbelievable. Grandpa found us standing in front of the house with our few belongings and was furious. They said they didn't want me, who isn't good at school, and Tom, who has a developmental disorder. I said, tears streaming down my face. Immediately, I felt warmth surround me. Grandpa hugged me tightly. "It's okay now. You've done well, Grace. I'm proud of you." Hearing those words made me cry even harder. Seeing me cry, Tom, not fully understanding, started crying too. Grandpa held us both until we calmed down. We then went to our grandparents' house. Grandma welcomed us with open arms and hugged us too, making us cry again. From then on, Tom and I lived with our grandparents. Grandpa had called my father, but was furious and said it was impossible to talk to him, so I can only imagine how that conversation went. But strangely, Grandpa's anger made me feel calm. A few days later, when things had settled down, Tom and I explored our grandparents' house. Their house in the countryside was huge. Besides the house, there was a mysterious place that caught my eye, so I asked Grandpa, "Grandpa, what's that?" "That's a distillery. Our family has been making whiskey for generations." From what I heard, my grandfather's family had been making whiskey for generations. However, they didn't have any famous brands, and the earnings weren't that great. Disliking that, my father didn't take over the family business and left home. After that, we became estranged and rarely saw our grandparents. Yet, they welcomed us with smiles, and I couldn't be more grateful. We told our grandparents about my brother. At first, they looked surprised, but then Grandpa said, "You know the saying, everyone is different, and that's okay? It's true. I'm not a big deal myself. I can't understand difficult books, and I'm often told I lack focus and have a short temper. But I've managed with the help of those around me. Grace and Tom are fine just the way they are." Grandma added, "It's okay to take it slow. Life is long, so there's no need to rush. In fact, being childlike for longer is quite endearing," she said, smiling and patting our heads. The kindness of our grandparents and Tom's innocent smile warmed my heart. Many times, I shed tears of joy. In the end, Tom and I had to transfer schools, but since it was a rural area, there were fewer students, and we quickly made friends. Just because it was the countryside didn't mean people were closed off. Everyone was very warm and welcoming. In that environment, Tom thrived, and I grew too. Thanks to our grandparents taking care of Tom, I finally had time for myself. Until then, I always felt the need to protect him and had no time for myself. Of course, I couldn't study properly under those conditions. So I studied hard, making up for lost time. Tom was fascinated by the distillery and often watched Grandpa and the craftsmen at work. Sometimes I missed my parents and Mike, but our grandparents showered us with so much love that I never felt lonely and was happy. Those 10 years flew by. At 22, I graduated from college and got a decent job. The job has good conditions and is close enough to commute from my grandparents' house. Tom, having graduated from high school, was already helping Grandpa with the family business. Tom had grown significantly and could converse almost perfectly. Sometimes he still said things that didn't quite make sense, but it was no big deal. At 20, Tom was now studying hard to get certified as a master distiller. He was so passionate about it that he spent every day discussing and debating with Grandpa and the craftsmen. Even Grandpa, who had aged considerably over the past 10 years, looked lively and happy during those times. In these peaceful and happy days, I often found myself smiling. However, a storm was about to break that peace. "Let us in." The voice shattered the early morning silence. My grandparents were already awake, and I, still groggy, headed to the door. "What do you want now?" Grandpa's angry voice jolted me fully awake. I peeked out to see what was happening, and when I saw who was there, my eyes widened. What? Dad? Mom? Yes, it was my parents. I hadn't seen them in 10 years, and they had changed drastically. For a moment, I didn't recognize them. But when my mother said, "Well, Grace, you've grown so much," I realized it was indeed her. My father had lost so much weight, his cheeks were sunken. He used to have a big belly, but now he was unbelievably thin. My mother, who used to go to the beauty salon frequently and always looked polished, now had messy hair, streaked with gray, and wore no makeup. She, too, was gaunt. "What happened to you two? Oh, thank goodness. Grace, tell them to take care of us." "Huh? What do you mean?" I was dumbfounded when my father spoke up. "I know everything. I heard the distillery is doing very well, making $5 million a year, right? If that's true, then it's simple. I'll take over the business, and you give us the money." I finally understood. Recently, the distillery had started doing very well, thanks to some new strategies, and the revenue had reached several $1 million. Somehow, my parents had heard about this and had come to claim their share. On top of that, he had the nerve to say he wanted to take over the business. Unbelievable. Don't be ridiculous. Who would let someone who abandoned their kids be the successor? Before I could even respond, Grandpa shouted. But my father kept pressing. "Please, we're broke and almost homeless. I'm your only precious son, right? Mom, say something. Without me, what will happen to this distillery that's been in the family for generations? Will you hand it over to strangers? Wait, you're broke? How did that happen?" I had a lot to say, but that caught my attention the most. Then my mother glared at me. She looked furious. "Thanks for asking, Grace. Let me tell you about that good-for-nothing eldest son." "Good-for-nothing eldest son? You mean Mike?" "Yes, he got too cocky after moving to the city. He turned down the university professor's recommendation and took a job at some ed company on his own, a tech company." "What the heck is that? Ed company? Oh, aita? Are there still people who make that mistake?" It seemed my mother was stuck in the Stone Age. "And then he went overseas for work. We told him to take us with him, but he left us behind. It's outrageous." "Ha ha. What's so funny?" my mother snapped when I couldn't help but laugh. But I didn't stop laughing. "It's just hilarious. You abandoned Tom and me, and now you've been abandoned by Mike. It's karma." "What did you say? Have you forgotten all we did for you? You think keeping us alive until we were 12 counts as raising us? You abandoned a 12-year-old and a 10-year-old, and you have the nerve to talk about raising us." I was dumbfounded by their audacity. "We quit our jobs thinking Mike would become rich and support us, but then he abandoned us. At our age, we can't get decent jobs. Please, Dad, even if not as the successor, let us stay here." "It's your beloved son asking." My father didn't seem to notice Grandpa's growing anger. His eyes were practically burning with rage. Grandma silently retreated to the back of the house. I knew Grandpa was furious. Just as I thought that, "Hey, what's going on?" Tom appeared with his usual carefree voice. "Tom, you've grown up so much," my mother exclaimed. My father added, "Is this the same Tom who couldn't even hold a conversation? Listen, you two. People always grow, and Tom has a mild developmental disorder, so of course he's grown and can talk. Tom, tell Grandpa to take care of us. We'll take care of you." All they could say was that they had no money. Then, suddenly, "Oh, I don't know you two," my brother said. The moment he said that, our parents froze. Smiling innocently, my brother repeated. Smiling brightly, Tom continued, "My family is Grandpa, Grandma, and my sister." "I don't know you two." "Well, what are you saying?" Despite his childish tone, Tom's firm resolve was clear. Feeling the strong rejection, my parents turned pale. "We don't let strangers in." Bye. With that, Tom retreated to the back of the house. "Wait, Tom. Grace, say something to him." "Huh?" Then, Grandma came back. She was holding a case with something white inside. "Leave." A low voice dominated the room. "What? Dad?" My father looked at Grandpa, who was looking down, with fear in his voice. Then suddenly, Grandpa looked up and shouted, "Tom is the successor of this distillery. We don't need you. You abandoned Grace and Tom, so you're a stranger. I have no intention of taking care of strangers. Leave now." "What? Tom as the successor?" That's impossible. Impossible? The reason our sales skyrocketed is because of Tom. What? What do you mean? Tom had started helping with the brewery right after high school, at 18. Though he couldn't drink until he was 21, he could tell the difference in taste just by smelling the whiskey. Any slight change in the flavor, and he noticed it immediately. I believe my brother's sensitivity to taste and smell, which made him picky as a child, played a big role. There are cases where developmental disorders manifest in such ways. And in Tom's case, it proved invaluable for making Waikiki. By using Tom's keen sense of smell to detect even slight changes, they were able to make numerous improvements, and according to Grandpa, something incredible was created. This resulted in a huge hit. When Tom turned 21 and could legally drink, his talents became even more apparent. Grandpa's distillery quickly reached annual sales of $5 million. Next year, it might even hit $10 million. Then you can let us stay here. We're Tom's parents. Don't be ridiculous. You abandoned your children. As Grandpa and my father argued, my mother stepped forward to join in. We're in so much debt, we could really use some help. Just as she said this, Grandma threw the white stuff she was holding at her. Oh, it's a slug, she said. Ugh, what is this? Salt? Why? Get out. Grandma continued to sprinkle salt on them, expressionless and scary. Like slugs, you demons should shrink and disappear. Mom, stop, please. Ow, it got in my eye. It hurts. My parents screamed as Grandma relentlessly threw salt at them without changing her expression. What a surreal scene. Get out, Grandpa shouted. Leave now, Grandma echoed. Goodbye forever. With that, I waved and threw the salt Grandma handed me at my parents, which was the final blow. Unable to take it anymore, they fled. After that, our parents called several times, but Grandpa warned them that he would report them to the police if they didn't stop, and they finally did. I have no idea what happened to them after that. So that's what happened. It was tough, Mike. I see. I'm really sorry. One day, I was on the phone. I was talking to Mike, who was working overseas. Despite everything, we had kept in touch. When we were kids, there was nothing we could do, and we ended up separated. But Kid Mike remained the same. When he found out we were staying with our grandparents, he kept in touch frequently. We reunited after a few years when he started college. Then, with the help of our grandparents, we devised a plan to help him escape from our parents. Had he stayed, our parents would have surely exploited him endlessly. As a result, he successfully moved overseas. We managed to get our parents out of our lives too. Finally, the three of us were free from our parents' grasp. I'll come to visit the next time I'm back in the States. Yeah, we'll be waiting. The new whiskey is the first one Tom's helped make since he's been able to drink. It's amazing. I can't wait. I'm looking forward to the day we can all drink together. Hearing the smile in his voice, I smiled too. Seeing me on the phone, Tom also beamed with a big smile.